Hi, I'm Elisabeth Hancock, and I'm an author, researcher of hidden history, consciousness, and our star ancestry. So here is the recording from the 12-hour live stream that you may have seen on YouTube. And I discovered that YouTube does not record past 12 hours. So of course, myself being the last speaker, I was chopped off the end. So as promised, here is my presentation from the 12-hour Tartaria Conference live stream. Okay, hi, I'm Elisabeth Hancock, and today I am going to talk about myths, non-humans, multidimensionality, and magic. In my opinion, there is nothing new under the sun. Everything that is happening now has happened before, and we haven't just discovered aliens, UFOs, portals, advanced technology, mobiles, fiber optics, and even AI. It was here before, and now it is being brought back as new. The question is, why? So if we look at these images from the past, what are we seeing here? Are we seeing old world technology? You can see the Vimana, the flying cities as talked about in the Indian Vedas. You can see on the top right-hand corner, there's a picture of a man with what looks like red hair, actually, but his skin looks quite sort of golden red as well. And he looks like he's sitting in a sort of craft, like a baby craft that hooks up with the mother craft. And then on the far left, we have some imagery. And again, these look very much like what we call UFOs today. And here are some of the pictures. So what is this? Is this New World technology? And these UFO images, they really don't look at all real. And I don't think any of these would be able to get through space if we consider that space is what we're told it is. So what are they? What are they doing here? And is this rebranding, reverse engineering? Are these really the same technologies as the Vimnanas, the flying cities from our ancient texts, the Indian Vedas? Or are these new technologies, spacecraft, UFOs? And here we have what I suspect UFOs actually are. And these, we could call them plasma craft, plasma consciousness. It is the consciousness of the being, the entity, the being, the transdimensional being that drives the craft. We just see light because they are vibrating at a much higher frequency. And of course, we've got this cloud in the bottom left-hand corner as well. And when they start naming clouds that look very much like mothership craft, I do feel a red flag is waving. And I have to start asking myself questions. Okay, what are we looking at here? So I suspect that this is what UFOs actually do look like, and not the previous picture that we saw before, which is obviously old world technology rebranded and brought back. And here we have old world portals. So I don't know if these are all portals, but they're all said to be portals. And the top left-hand corner, we'll look at a story around that in a minute. The one in the middle, which is the rectangular one, I believe that this one comes from the Vatican. The one slightly above it, I believe, has been found in the Middle East and was actually a functional working portal. And then we have the Japanese one. These are known as places where you can go and connect between the worlds. So it's times of the year when the veil is thinner and we're able to connect to other beings, entities from other dimensions. And then we have these. So these are known as art. This is modern art in today's world. But I wonder about this. They don't look like modern art to me. And the fact that so many places are now getting these huge, big round circles, and then we have the square, the rectangular there as well in Dubai, just makes me wonder what exactly is going on here. And the fact that we are busy moving into space, which we'll look at in a minute, does make me wonder what these are going to be for. Is this part of our galactic moving, that part of us connecting back with the galaxy? Are these modern day portals of some sort? Who knows? So looking at the golden frame that's in Dubai, I do wonder what exactly this is. Of course, it's supposed to be art. It's supposed to be something on the landscape that looks beautiful, and it certainly does. But it also looks quite odd. And this reminds me of a story that I heard from Linda Moulton Howe recently, where a whistleblower from the US Navy was talking to her about portals that are in the world. he was saying that they are all over the world. And the ones that he saw were square, not round, which is interesting. And that makes us, of course, think of this golden frame in Dubai. According to him, one goes from Harp in Alaska to just outside Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. And this is one of the ones that he went through. He said that you literally just step through the portal and you are there. There's nowhere for you to go. There's no sort of sensation of flying. You literally just step through and you are there. And his colleagues also went through portals, but some of them went to off-world locations. He didn't, however. But what is another world? What is off-world? Are we talking about another dimension here? Are we talking about space? What is it exactly is meant by these terms? Well, another interview that Linda Moulton Howe was doing, she was interviewing Jerry Wills, who's an energy healer and author, and he also is a contactee. He actually claims to have come from Tau Ceti. He's one of the dropped off babies. He certainly is very tall with sort of strawberry blonde hair, which is how the Tau Ceti are supposed to have been described, with white skin and light colored eyes. And he talks about how one time on holiday with his wife, he put his head inside the Amaru Muru, which is this particular portal here, also known as the Gate of the Gods in Peru by the local indigenous people. He talks about how, as he put his head inside, he recited certain words and used a symbol or symbols whilst he put his head inside. And he vanished, he disappeared. His wife was 100 meters away and witnessed him disappear. He claims to have found himself in a white corridor and heard a voice explain to him that he had found his way to another universe. The people that he was talking to in this universe, in this white corridor, I think he just heard them as sort of voices in his ears. They told him that they had discovered our universe growing inside theirs and had put in multiple portals in our world to monitor our growth. They said that he was not the first one to enter, and there were others that had come through this way, which of course immediately makes me think about Indigenous people possibly traveling in the same way as him, finding themselves in a white corridor, and immediately what would come into their mind is that these were the gods, and they had passed to the gods, and this was a gate to the gods, which of course is what they called it. So another interesting point is that these people that were inside this other universe, they told him that they had discovered that they were inside another universe themselves and was growing as fast as we were. And so they were monitoring us growing inside their universe and them growing inside another universe, which makes me think of M theory of Michio Kaku, who talks about how universes, different dimensions are like sort of colliding brains. As they collide into each other, they sort of integrate like a Venn diagram would, and we are able to see split periods of time where we're able to connect to other dimensions. And of course, this could be what they call, or what we call, the thinning of the veil. So during the equinox, during important times of the year, the solstice, these are the times when these veils thin. So these membranes, these brains colliding, they integrate, we're able to see into other worlds, and then they move back out again, and we're not able to anymore. So who are the gods? And again, just thinking back to there's nothing new under the sun. So these are the old world gods, and these are what we possibly would call transdimensional people today, or ETs even. But here we have the elongated skulls. This is the top one is Amenhotep III from the Egyptian pharaohs. The bottom one is the Anunnaki god, again showing an elongated skull. We also have Osiris on the far top left, another elongated skull, and also the blue skin that we can see with Vishnu and Osiris. And these blue-skinned beings are talked about a lot in our myths and legends. And so we've got to ask ourselves, is this true? Were there blue-skinned people living on our planet? And when we consider that blue-skinned people could simply be beings that their blood works off copper rather than iron. So they have copper-based blood rather than iron-based blood. So our iron-based blood makes it red. Their copper-based blood makes their blood blue. And then, of course, that immediately makes us think of the blue bloods. So the aristocracy, the queens, the kings, they were always referred to as the blue blood. So did they actually have blue blood? And are we talking about transdimensional, interdimensional beings here? And talking about beings, we've got the bottom right-hand corner, we have obviously the angels, the beings of light, the angels that are talked about in all of our religious texts. What exactly is an angel? Is it a being of light, something that we don't see as physical in this dimension because the energy is vibrating faster than ours is? But in a higher dimension, they would be seen as physical. And then we have the new world gods, entities and beings. And here we can see the Arcturians, the Pleiadians, the Andromedans. We've got a few Pleiadians here. We've got one Pleiadian coming out of one of those spacecraft. This is the story with Billy Myers, where he talks about meeting a Pleiadian that used to visit him. And it just seems very odd. The spacecraft really does look like it's from the 1950s, doesn't look advanced at all. But that's not to say that there aren't beings living in other dimensions to us, because as we'll come to in a minute, the Pleiades is one of those areas that comes up again and again and again in the indigenous myths and legends. And here, the top left-hand corner, we have, this is Valiant Thor. He is supposed to be a Venusian from Venus, and he has visited the Earth. He is talked about in the book by Frank Strangers, which is a stranger in the Pentagon. Apparently, he lived in the Pentagon when Eisenhower was in power and tried to persuade humans to become more peaceful and to stop using nuclear weapons, which they ultimately refused to do, and he ended up leaving. But at the time, he was willing to trade advanced technology that would prolong our life, that would also heal our bodies, and advanced ways of growing crops that would allow us to eliminate famine immediately. And in return, we needed to give up using nuclear weapons, which of course we didn't do. And this was 70, 80 years ago, which does make us wonder what would have happened if they had accepted these terms. And on that basis, who were the Venetians? Where do they come from? Do they come from Venus? So were these entities and beings physical? We've just looked at some Arcturians with sort of the long skull. And yes, they were physical because we have found bones and we've tested the DNA. Human DNA is present in as little as 25%, but also as much as 75% in some of them. And the rest of the DNA is unknown. The very small ones that you can see in the middle picture on the far left, you can see they have no human DNA at all. And there was a female of their species found with 3 eggs inside her, showing that they are biological. Now, Dr. Gary Nolan, who is an immunologist and professor of pathology at the Stanford School of Medicine, believes that he has found a way to track or test DNA. And his method shows him that DNA, human DNA, can be traced back 9 billion years. He says that as our planet is only 4.5 billion years old, it shows that humans did not originate from here. We also have the Indian Vedas, which are some of the oldest, if not the oldest books on Earth, which say a lot of very interesting things we'll come to in a minute. But one of the things that they do say is that there are 400,000 humanoid species in the universe. So based on that, we would all share some type of DNA. So humanoids are all part of the same species, but probably adapted to different environments through wave genetics or the morphic field, through panspermia, which we could see as space dust. It's intermingling with our DNA, which they believe is what all these millions of quantum mutations, genetic mutations, have been over the past few 100,000 years. And another interesting aspect, which will sort of run through, because it sort of runs through all of their texts really, is that they talk about us being the lower consciousness humans, as opposed to the higher consciousness or more evolved ones. So the Indian Vedas describe a race of evolved human beings called the Aryans, who are believed to be stronger, more intelligent, and more culturally refined than others. And of course, the first thing that we immediately think of is Tartarians. Are these the Aryans, the Tartarians? And are these the higher evolved humans? According to them, yes. And we are the indigenous modern day humans. And the indigenous and modern day humans are described as lower consciously evolved. So we are the lower consciousness humans. So if the Tartarians were the higher consciousness humans, where have they gone? Where have they disappeared to? Most of the elongated skulled people have between 50 to 75% of human DNA. So it looks like they were human, or at least the mother was. But it depends on what we are calling human DNA. The most famous bloodline, as we can see on the image, is the line of the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten. So this is part of the line Amenhotep III. He's also part of that same line. So were these elongated people the more evolved humans that the ancient texts say lived alongside us? Researcher and author Freddie Silver makes an interesting case for these people having evolved in this way because they predominantly use the parietal cortex, which is the area of the brain associated with spiritual and dream state. And thus, this part of their brain physically grew, creating an elongated skull. This allowed them to be able to work with magic and control the laws of nature. In contrast, modern-day humans evolved the frontal cerebral cortex of the brain, which processes information. So this essentially meant that we were more in the physical world, we were more in the external world, and these elongated people were more in the spiritual dream state world. Another interesting aspect is that this growth in the neocortex also switched on emotions like compassion, sympathy, and empathy for us, making us into this compassionate and loving species that we are today. However, on the flip side, it's also making us easier to control through emotions like guilt, shame, and fear. We have such a wide spectrum of emotions, allowing us to experience this reality in a very emotional way, which on some hand can create wonderful euphoric experiences in this physical world. But on the other hand, it can create very deep, dark, depressing experiences as well, which I suspect is possibly where we've got to now. The late Karen Hoods, who was told of an elongated skulled, blonde-haired and blue-eyed man sitting in a bank boardroom meeting one day, was told that they are human and have been living alongside us for millennia. Interestingly, there's also some evidence to show that the Basque people who have the largest amount of Rh blood, had this elongated cranium too, before the round skulls invaded. There are also skeletal remains of a peaceful and short-stature elongated skulled people who lived around Stonehenge in the UK, and who were murdered by these tall, round-skulled people. This apparently dates back to around 4000 BC to maybe 2500 BC. They respected the land and appeared to work with the energy ley lines, and they also had ears that were further back on their heads to us, suggesting that they may have had different shaped ears. Their DNA does not hold any human DNA, or it may have worked itself out of our genes by now, because genetic testing isn't an exact science, it's actually more of an art. Straight after I read this about the different shaped ears, the first thing that came into my head was, well, are these the elves? Are these the elves that come up in our myths and our legends as our stories, that they had different shaped ears? It also looks like these people, they lived in this community, they worked and lived together, but they also had advanced knowledge that we have obviously forgotten about today. For example, they enhanced their crops by working with the land using sacred geometry and growing their food in alignment with powerful solstice and equinox energy. This apparently enabled them to grow 2 crops every year, helping them to grow more food for their community of people. So these gods were obviously physical, because there are many stories, and the Indigenous stories in particular, who tell us that these gods, that they refer to as gods, were physical beings and which they copied. So we've got the Dogon tribe from Mali who copied the Numu. They say that they have been visited by this Numu, who is this amphibian reptilian humanoid, which we can see on the top right-hand image. This is actually one of the Ubaid statues, but the author of the book, Masters of Speech, believes that these Ubaid statues is evidence of these Numu people and how they physically came and visited our planet hundreds of years ago, because they were said to have been visiting the Dogon tribe for hundreds of years, and then they stopped coming, maybe a couple of hundred years ago, they stopped coming, and they no longer come in person, but they still connect to them using shamanic practices according to the tribe. The women in their tribe, they also file their teeth to a point to copy these particular Numu. They also practiced the art of head binding, which is something that we see all around the world. It's literally in every single continent. And in Europe, it was right up until the 19th century in France where the small villages were still using this head binding practice. And when asked why they did this, they all refer to how they are emulating the gods, how if they have a child with elongated skull, this child will be blessed, they'll be more intelligent, they will be this sort of higher being, which makes me again think of this higher being, higher evolved consciousness and lower evolved consciousness. And also the ancient Sumerians said that the elongated head people, or Anunnaki as we know them as, were the first people who created man and were gods or immortals who ruled the lands. The Sumerian tablets retranslation, which is not Sitchin's, but it's a new translation by another researcher called Anthony Parks, who is from France. He suggests that the Anunnaki were from another dimension because of a line that he's retranslated, which says that they came in strength from beyond time. I also feel that they come from another dimension as well. And if they've come in from another dimension, it would sort of explain why they're not here anymore, because they can go back to that dimension, walking through portals on the earth, which I suspect that there are hundreds of, if you have the right key or vibration to be able to walk through. And again, we can see the bottom right-hand image. We can see that this is one of the Anuna gods found in Syria, dated to 1006 BC, apparently. And the Book of Enoch as well. Enoch describes the Watchers as being very tall beings with elongated heads who were able to take physical form if they so wished. And this tells us again that these people must have been transdimensional beings. And my understanding is that transdimensional means that they are from another dimension, so it's other dimension. And interdimensional being means it's between dimensions, so inter meaning between dimensions. And this tells us that transdimensional being could be seen as a physical being who has been able to move through to another dimension. But interdimensional being can be seen as the archons or the demons who don't actually have physical bodies themselves and therefore are more like parasites. They latch onto people and they essentially use their body for whatever it is they want to use it for. And this we would know as demonic possession, but I suspect that this is also what addiction is as well. So is our world multidimensional? Is our universe multidimensional? Well, mainstream science says that the universe is not multidimensional. It essentially refers to it as a three-dimensional expanse where matter and energy exist, and it's governed by laws such as general relativity. However, there have been many theories and theoretical models which have suggested that space is multidimensional and exists rather like wormholes, where you can span the entire length and breadth of space by traveling through wormholes, which of course we've seen in all the sci-fi movies. But what I find so interesting about this is at the moment, there's such a big push to go into space. The Artemis Accords have now been signed by 55 countries, which is a non-binding set of principles designed to guide civil space exploration and use in the 21st century. So why now? Why are we suddenly doing this now? China and Russia are refusing to join. Instead, they're setting up their own thing. And what I find even more interesting is former Israeli space security chief, Professor Aim Ished, said publicly in 2020 that a galactic federation exists, but the members are waiting for humans to reach a stage where they will understand what space and spaceships are. And I think for me, this says to me that if we don't know what space is, it means that what we currently think it is not what it is. Therefore, it's not a three-dimensional linear expanse. So what is it exactly? Well, on the other hand, the Indian Vedas say that the universe is multidimensional. They say that humans have been living here for 4 million years. And as we said before, there are 400,000 humanoid species or beings in the universe. However, They do not categorize by species. They categorize by 3 different types of beings. And they refer to these as the higher beings, the lower beings, and human beings. So the lower beings, they would say, live in the lower worlds. And these are the Asuras. These are the demons, the Bhutaganas, which is what we would call greys, and the Nagas, which is what we would call reptilians. And these are the lower beings. They live in the lower worlds, and they have caused problems for human beings for hundreds of years. They've been doing this, but they are part of the physical world, if you like, the lower world. And then in contrast, we have the upper. So this is where the higher beings live. This is the upper parts of the universe. This is the stars, the planets, the celestials. These are the devas, who are evolved beings that live in the upper planetary system. They apparently experience the universe differently to those living in the lower worlds. And of course, if they were living in a higher dimension or higher density to the rest of us, then they would experience the universe differently. They would be more energy and less physical matter. They would have less density, so they would have less depression, less lower consciousness, less mental health problems. They would most likely even not have to eat, or if they did, they would live off very high vibrational foods such as fruits and plants. The Indian Vedas say that in our dimension, space is empty and planets are a long way away from each other. In the higher beings dimension, space is closer together, and they can travel to each planet through interplanetary pathways. Well, this sounds like wormholes. Apparently, in the Himalayas, there are certain passages that can connect our planet to these celestial planets, but only those with higher levels of consciousness can connect and travel through. The higher consciousness ones can walk and end up in one of the celestial planets instead. Apparently, the higher beings can also come to physical planets and help, and they impart spiritual knowledge, new technologies, health modalities, whatever they can impart to help the human beings when things get tough. But what about if space is made up of plasma, and in fact, if the universe is made up of plasma? Because plasma can show how interdimensional or transdimensional travel and communication can be made. Over 99% of our universe is most likely made up of plasma, which has a lot of charged particles in the form of ions and electrons. Plasma is a great conductor, and therefore is responsible for facilitating lightning, solar flares, neutron stars, etc. Plasma can be solid, nebulous, an electric fog, or completely invisible. And I suspect is what we used to call the ether in the 1800s. The late physicist David Bohm believed plasma comes alive and acts as a medium for intelligences operating outside of space-time, in what he and other scientists refer to as non-local or pre-space-time. Bohm believed that these intelligences come from a deeper level of existence and are real. Canadian psychologist Michael Persinger, he looks at the field effects of electromagnetism on the brain, which led him to believe that these electromagnetic fields and geomagnetic activity were responsible for impacting the temporal lobes, stimulating otherworld experiences and communication with beings from other worlds, but real ones, not hallucinations, showing that we are part of a multidimensional existence, and we just can't access it as easily as other species can, at least not now. And of course, this makes me immediately think of the Indigenous tribes connecting through times in the year where the veil was thinner. They were able to start connecting through meditation and connecting with these, what we could call plasma beings, and experiencing, talking with them, connecting with them, understanding more about them, just as so many people are still talking about today. Another interesting point is that our brain is already set up for 11 dimensions because of the storage system that it has in it. And currently scientists believe that this is a storage system, and it's where our memories are stored. But in reality, our memories are not stored in our physical head, and I think most of us know this by now. So these 11 dimensions, it means that we are designed for higher states of interdimensional perception already. We essentially are already built for a multidimensional world. So why are we not living in a multidimensional world now? Well, I suspect that our ancestors were, because those amazing buildings, just the architecture that you've seen in the presentations this evening, just those amazing buildings alone, they could not have been built by hand. They just are incredibly intricate. And the use of sacred geometry that just flows all the way through them makes one see that these were not built with hammer and chisel. They were not even built with machines. They were built in some sort of 3D printing way, maybe, or some sort of harnessing of the holographic field using sound to create these cymatic shapes, which you just see all over these cathedrals and churches. It seems very much like these were built in another dimension and possibly got stapled into one dimension, the third dimension, after something happened in our world. And we'll come back to that because there are signs of other things that have been stapled into one dimension as well. So as we talked about before, the Pleiades is talked about in so many cultures, and you can see the list of all the different cultures where the Pleiades is referred to. And it was obviously, and still is, a very important part of the cosmos for the indigenous tribes and the ancient people. And some of these tribes also say that their ancestors came from there. But it's too hot to inhabit in our linear space-time because it's such a brand new star system. So what exactly is going on? Why would we be able to come from the Pleiades when it's uninhabitable? Well, maybe we can find our answers in quantum physics. The double slit experiment, which was first carried out in 1801, shows us that it's our own human consciousness and all that this entails that creates and affects reality. The observer effect, which has been studied for more than 100 years, always shows the same thing. The observer changes the outcome of the experiment. So in effect, we could say that it is our consciousness and the consciousness of other beings and entities that create everything we see in the universe by observing the field of ether or plasma into being. We could see God as a 0-point field, the point of all creation, which essentially just creates, and then creator beings, such as ourselves, have found a way to harness this in order to create the physical manifestations, the incredible architectures and cities that we see in the old world. And is this why we never find the end of the universe? Because once we observe it, we simply create more of it. Is this what the space agenda is now? We are creating it with human consciousness, but it's being driven by the parasites. So the different countries who are signing the Artemis Accords, they're going to be the ones that are leading the way with what space is. But essentially, theirs will be the consciousness that creates the definition of space, and we will simply be following along with it, not realizing that that's not space. Space, like everything, is essentially not there. It's all energy. And we collapse the waves into physical matter to create the reality that we see around us. The Book of Giants, which is also another book from the Bible, infers that the world was populated by ordinary people and godlike, extremely tall people who possessed knowledge of advanced technologies and the laws of nature. Indigenous accounts also support this notion, telling of two races of people who are living on Earth side by side. Giant bones have been found on every continent in the 1,000, from skeletal remains to huge skulls to petrified bones and fossilized body parts. The Bible refers to the giants, or Nephilim, as being the offspring of the Watchers, or fallen angels. It is even said that red-haired giants were the first inhabitants of the Americas 25 to 55,000 years ago, as so many mummified bodies have been found there. The Wichita, the Hopi, and the Zuni tribes tell stories of their women breeding with advanced people who had supernatural abilities and lived extraordinarily long lives. Only a few women survived giving birth to these huge babies, and although it started off well as they grew, their size led to barbaric and violent behavior by some of them. Many of the giant skeletons or mummified remains found around the world have 6 fingers and toes, which can also be seen in imagery, artifacts, and myths. In the Bible, it talks about David and Goliath, with Goliath's brother having 6 fingers and toes. The polydactyl trait is also in our genes and known to affect as many as 1 in 10 people in today's world, which is not only a huge amount, but it shows that we interbred with these giants, or we are the giants, but we've been genetically altered to become smaller. Interestingly, many of these giants also had elongated skulls, as well as red hair, which we can also see in our world today. In the book of Adam and Eve, Enoch talks about how those leaving the enclosure at Gar Sag for the valley below notice the substance of their bodies becoming denser. So they start off looking higher dimensional. Does this tell us that the mountains are in a higher dimension, like the Himalayas are? Or is Enoch describing the lowering of consciousness as they walk down the mountain? Higher consciousness people would look more radiant and glowing, as they still do today, and we can describe them as more energy, less matter, as Dr. Joe Dispenza says. The Siberian and Iranian people also claimed their ancestors were less dense, and that their skin was more pale and radiant. Their hair was often white. The Talmuks and Tibetans of Central Asia also report that the bodies of these advanced people gave off light, and compared them to the stars. They lived for hundreds of years and only ate fruit from a forgotten tree. However, the more they associated with the physical world, as in ate the food and probably married the locals, the more dense and less luminous they became, and the shorter their lifespans were. Were they descending into lower dimensions or densities themselves? Were they becoming lower consciousness beings by participating more with the lower consciousness of the collective world? Is this where we are now? Have the higher beings who have incarnated here become lower beings due to the collective low vibrations of the planet? The Hopi claim their ancestors are from the Pleiades and refer to their ancestral homeland as Tyami, whilst the Cree people state that their ancestors arrived on Earth in spirit form, then became humans on Earth. The story of humans originating as spirit and then creating their own physical form appears to be part of the beliefs of the Indigenous tribes and First Nations people around the world, from Native Americans in the US to the Aborigines of Australia, and even the Cruthens of Ireland, who are said to be the first people before the Celts. So is manifestation simply a matter of using our conscious intent on the plasma field to shape it into matter? Is this how we created our world and these incredible old world architectural buildings that we see? But it's not just our ancestors who are beings of light. We are still beings of light, which we can see again in the different cultures around the world. The rainbow body, for example, in Tibetan culture, has been used by monks for centuries for leaving this world when they want to move on, or what we would call die. They meditate for days, weeks, and even years until there's nothing left but light, which transforms back to energy, as in it becomes invisible. These are all different forms of plasma, which is why I suspect that plasma is the way that our world is shaped, formed, manifested. For example, Kempo Echos went into a deep sleep until finally he died. This was said to be over quite a few years. Within days, his body had grown smaller and smaller until it became a beautiful rainbow with shades of greens, golds, and purples, and he then disappeared. You can see in the images on the left-hand side, these are all the different images taken from the myths and legends, the old texts, the old imagery, and you can see this rainbow body appearing in so many of these different cultures. It's also in the Amazon as well. The shamans there call it the jaguar body. And again, it's this radiant energy field that essentially allows them to leave this life without suffering or pain. And what they've done is they've moved to a different state of consciousness, a different state of plasma, if you like. But they've moved, they are no longer physical, and they are now a different state of being. They are still there, as so many of us already know when our loved ones passed over. They're still there. They're just not physical anymore. Millions of Tibetan scrolls are beginning to resurface, saved from the destruction of the Red Guards during the communist regime of Mao Zedong. They're now being translated and contain pre-flood information about the Atlanteans, with the monasteries being built to hold the knowledge, advanced technologies that were used in both Lemuria and Atlantis, and the 40 or 50 visiting extraterrestrial species who have gifted knowledge and wisdom over the centuries. Interestingly, the Tibetan monks also refer to the regular visits of the Venusians in their texts, something which they say is still happening today. And the way that they describe it, it sounds like the mountains of Tibet are in regular contact with these beings, especially the Venusians. And again, you can see Val Thor, who said that he comes from Venus. So looking at the Indian Vedas again, the Vedic scriptures, there were interspecies wars happening in the past. And they have descriptions of these wars between these demigods, higher beings, and demons, lower beings, of different shapes and types. In the Mahabharata, there is a description about Arjuna killing demons who live underwater and escape with their advanced spacecraft. Well, we know that more craft come out of the water than the sky. So what is that telling us? That space is not out there, and greys and reptilians are not coming from space. They are coming from here, and probably other dimensions too. These Vimana were said to roam the sky at extremely high speeds, controlled by thousands of evil creatures with big round eyes with helmets on their heads. Is this the greys that are talked about in the Indian Vedas as being lower beings from the lower worlds? In Hartwig Hausdorff's book, The Chinese Roswell, he talks of a craft crash landing in the mountains of Byankara Ula between Tibet and China 12,000 years ago. They interbred with the local population, probably through genetic altering or wave genetics rather than sexual relations. And the descendants of these Dropa extraterrestrials, who appear to be what we'd call short greys, still live in the area and are called the Dropa tribe. Interestingly, the original tribe, before they took on the name of Dropa, were called the Ham tribe. And we know of Ham as being one of the sons of Noah, who are said to have repopulated the earth after the flood. Ham is often said to be the bad one, or the one that creates a lot of problems, and his family line are said to still be creating problems today and have made up many of what we would call the parasitic elites. In 1937, Chinese archaeologist Chipu Te led an official expedition to a remote mountainous region in Tibet, where they found a cave with the skeletal remains of a 4-foot-tall humanoid race with very large heads and 716 circular engraved stones, which are said to hold the story of their crash, their past history from their planet, and their advanced technology. And you can see the image on the right. This is what the circular engraved stones look like, and they remind me of these vinyl records that we used to have, and possibly they are read in a similar sort of way. In fact, that reminds me of another story that I read, which is talking about ancient scrolls that were found, and they were read by wetting your finger and then running your finger along the scroll. And this would intuitively impart the knowledge into your mind, which is also said to be what the emerald tablets are for as well. Many of these texts, they say that we will not be able to access this information until we raise our own vibration, until we become a higher consciousness being ourselves. And so maybe that is what is happening at the moment. These different scrolls and things that have been found or are being found, and we know that there are certainly tens of thousands of them underneath the Vatican. Maybe these things are going to come out once the deep state has stopped being quite so prominent in the world, and once human consciousness is at an understanding of realizing that we are creating all of this, and then perhaps this information will be given back to us and we can use it to create the world that we want to live in. So moving from the mountains down into China and Tibet, they possibly even created some of the first Chinese and Tibetan ancestral lines. And it would certainly explain the shorter stature, the sort of grey-brown skin, the hairless bodies and face, and maybe even the very short legs, that type of body type. And of course, I'm not talking about race. This is not political agenda that we're talking about here. It is simply a curiosity to understand how we became such a varied species ourselves. When you look at other species in the animal kingdom, they are all the same within each species. Now, I do not think that humans are part of the animal kingdom. I think that we are humanoid, human DNA, very, very different to the animal consciousness. However, I think the only thing that we can see when we look at the varied races amongst us is that we are a variety of different species. We are not one species, and we'll come back to that one in a little bit as well. Could this be why the Asian and Indian civilizations have so many stories of advanced technologies and flying craft in their ancient texts dating back thousands of years? That they inherited them from these visitors? The oldest Chinese book, the Zhuoha, says that their dragon lineage began 7,000 years ago and created the line of emperors, and they were gods. Japan and Korea also say the same. And they talk about being descended from dragons, that they are the dragon lineage. So who are the dragons? Are these what we would call reptilian beings today? So interestingly, the Vedas do not categorize by species, they categorize by consciousness, which I think is a very interesting way of looking at it. So when we talk about races and species, reptilians or greys, we're not talking about the physical body. We're talking about the lower consciousness, the higher consciousness, which is why I think that higher consciousness is a matter of choice. I think some beings choose to stay in lower consciousness states, as do some humans. The psychopathic gene has now grown from 5% to 10% of the world's population, indicating that something is definitely happening here on Earth as well. The Indian Vedas say that the higher beings do not have children, but if they want to create a new bloodline or have children, they incarnate into a higher consciousness bloodline, and they would incarnate as a child, and as they grow, they would teach or lead or impart new knowledge into the world. So looking at the different humanoid species, this seems to indicate that the humanoids can all interbreed with each other. And of course, wave genetics shows that DNA can be altered by energy waves or even telepathy, and doesn't have to be physical at all, which I also suspect is being done, because I think it's being done now as well, which we'll come back to in the last slide. So are we looking at advanced technology or are we looking at magic? And that's an interesting concept, because magic is everywhere in our world. And if we try and think back to where did it start from, it's possibly been around here for as long as we've been around here, but we only have these ancient texts to look at where we can gather some sort of understanding. And of course, we have the Bible, we have the Indigenous accounts, and when we look at the different accounts talked about here in this long list, we can see that the gods have gifted us many, many different things. And one of the things that they have gifted us is the understanding of alchemy, rituals, spells, magic symbols, what we call runes. And this has all come through, and also astronomy, cosmology, this has all come through into modern day. But when these were first gifted to us, it seems that humans, or lower consciousness humans, apparently abused this idea of magic. So the Watchers, or fallen angels, they decided that the human women were very gorgeous and they wanted to marry them. So they essentially came to Earth, married human women, and started to share their advanced knowledge with these human wives. So they taught them spellbinding, spells, magic, sorcery, and even things like fireballs, lightning, stars, the auguries of the earth. They taught them a lot of advanced information, which they were not of that higher consciousness to be able to know how to use it wisely. And unfortunately, it meant that humans fell into destruction. Or at least this is what the Bible is telling us. And I do think the Bible has been edited so much that it's possibly even inverted these days. But it's still interesting information, which I think we can use with discernment. So as I said before, magic is everywhere. Magic is the art of using sound, sacred geometry, words, and hidden forces to direct and control energy. These sounds have powerful vibrational patterns that can be used to direct energy and harness its power. Some of them can even be used to stir up emotions, which strengthen the effects of the magic rituals even more. Isn't the TV and media doing this all the time? Isn't all TV programming designed to trigger us and make us angry, make us feel sad, pulling our emotions which way and that? Not only are these strengthening the effects of the magic rituals that are being done on us, but it's also providing a literal energy source that these beings and entities can live off us with. The term rune comes from Old Norse, meaning a secret letter that can cast spells, and has been linked to magic, divination, and spellcasting ever since, possibly because their geometric shapes may be carrying, moving, and harnessing energy. Norse mythology traces runes back to the gods Odin and Loki, who, according to the myths, use them for various magical purposes. But they are not the only gods or advanced people who use magic. There is magic everywhere in our world, which has been passed down through mystery schools in Egypt, priests in Babylon, and every other nation for millennia. It was supposed to be for the more evolved, higher consciousness people, known as initiates, but it keeps being discovered by others and being abused. Secret societies probably even started out as good, but then as people desired more power, they became more corrupt. Even Enoch was described as being a magician, and the first man, Adapa from the Sumerian tablets, possessed advanced skills too. If they were the bloodlines of the gods, or a hybrid bloodline, then maybe this explains how they were able to wield magic. Interestingly, the reptilians are said to use a combination of telepathy, technology, and mind control programming to seem to shapeshift to look like humans, meaning we are programmed not to see them walking amongst us, rather than them physically morphing into actual humans. One Mesopotamian text talks about the 7 tablets of destiny that contained formulas which gave them great power. When Anzu stole the tablets from Enlil, the other gods didn't want to chase after him because they said he now had the same power as Enlil and were scared he would turn them into clay. The tablets of destiny are probably part of what the text termed the maze. These maze seem to be incantations, sacred geometry, symbols or symbolic words, nuclear codes that can give certain abilities to the user, a collection of symbols that were able to insert new holographic images into the morphogenic field, thus bend consciousness and change reality. So is this how the incredible structures of the old world were built or created? When I first moved into my house, lots of weird stuff started to happen. We heard loud footsteps across the landing at night. Something sat on me in the middle of the night, and the energy was really off. I later discovered that the whole row of houses was said to be haunted. Because I'm also an intuitive healer and energy worker, I work with these sorts of things all the time, and I knew it was an inverted ley line running through the house. Entities and beings can channel through electromagnetic waves, and when they are inverted, you can get demons, trapped souls, and even greys or reptilians coming through. I use dowsing rods, which you can see in the top right image, to find the inverted ley line. They run off underground waterways, and then I blocked it up using an upside-down omega symbol. This symbol alters the holographic field in the same way that magic does. The omega symbol stops the energy flow or diverts it. And interestingly, alpha signals the beginning. As Jesus said, I am the alpha and the omega. I am the beginning and the end. So we can see that this is what this does. It stops the energy. It creates an end. The Menehune people from Hawaii were said to be people with magical powers who could control the laws of nature. They were said to be able to build an entire temple made of stone overnight. But in their stories, they were said to have become arrogant and began to abuse their magic. The gods then unleashed a cataclysm to wipe them out. So it seems that it's abuse of magic or altering the holographic field that prompts wipeout scenarios, suggesting it possibly affects other dimensions or realms. This same story also comes up in the Vedas, and many of the indigenous tribes talk of new worlds, as one world is wiped out and the civilization starts again. We've got the celestial alignments that guide the transition of these worlds, and it's talked about there's a spiritual renewal that comes into place. There's also a great awakening that comes towards the end of it. These are the sacred times when the energy starts shifting. And every single one of these cultures talks about this being a time when it's absolutely fundamentally important to rebalance with nature, to get back with nature, to stop abusing the world, abusing each other, and to reconnect again what they would call spiritual growth, spiritual renewal. Because of course we are a spirit. That's what the light being has shown us. We are a spirit having a physical experience. And through time, it seems that possibly we start to forget that. The Indian Vedas that says that humans have been here for millions of years talks about every new period or every new world, a Manu is created to leave humanity into the next cycle. The Mayans believe that we are in our 7th world, the Hopi in our 5th world. But what do they mean by world? Are they talking about a period, an era, a simulation, a dimension, realm? And more importantly, are we coming to the end of a cycle now? Because it feels like there's something coming to an end, something coming to a head. But it's difficult to understand exactly what that is. Certainly the Mayans said that 2012 was the end of a cycle, which means that we have come out of one cycle and we're going into another one. In the past, this would have been what they would refer to as a wipeout event. But we obviously haven't been wiped out. So there seems to be a link to magic here, that when magic is abused, this needs to be stopped fast. And is this when the world gets wiped out? This is the same as Atlantis as well, that Atlantis was said to collapse into the sea because they misused magic in some way or blew themselves up with their crystal technologies. Does this magic affect other realms? And they can't allow this to happen, just like our nuclear bombs are being disabled now by off-planet energies because it affects other dimensions in the multiverse too. Is magic simply an understanding of how reality really works, the true nature of reality? And was it passed to higher consciousness people because it's essentially how our world or reality exists? With the knowledge being passed to more responsible people, we could create beautiful worlds like the ones that we can see here on the image, this old world, beautiful architecture, enabling us to create these incredible structures and buildings by using the holographic field, or what we would call magic, advanced technology, to create it with. However, it's too tempting for lower consciousness people who are constantly seeking this advanced technology in order to be able to weaponize it and use it for more control, greed, and power. Even John Dee was said to have rediscovered old Atlantean texts and used them to summon demons in the 1500s, 1600s. When he was serving Elizabeth I, he wanted to try and make her more powerful so she could beat her enemies. But instead, possibly he opened a portal or summoned in some demons and didn't mean to let these interdimensional beings in. And are they linked to the Romans or the Catholic Church in some way, the Church of Rome? If so, are they using it to open portals, or are they using black magic spells on our collective consciousness? I think we would all say the answer is yes to this, but maybe we don't understand quite how they're doing it. English is literally the language of angels, Angles, Anglo-Saxons, Anglais. It all derives from the same word. And essentially, language creates our reality. So are we beings of light who have forgotten who we are? Have we been stapled into a one-dimensional existence, along with the buildings and the architecture of the old world? Have we been led to believe that we're solid flesh, when in reality we exist in multiple dimensions, as our brain shows us, and are also made of light, not physical matter? Chromosome 7, which controls speech and complex language, and the gene FOXP2, after being dormant for 75 million years, suddenly switched on around 200,000 years ago, linking up our mouth, our tongue, and our jaw with the brain, enabling us to use our mouth, jaw, and tongue to create complex sounds. Was this a negative thing or a good thing? I think it depends how you look at it, because we can see that sound creates this reality. So did we create the ability to be able to speak and create sound so that we could create this reality that we live in today? Our language or our sound is what's creating all of this. It builds the physical field, as we can see with the other presentations today. The field of cymatics, sound creates the sacred geometry. It is the physical manifestation of that sound. In studies that they've carried out inside cathedrals, they've left plates of sand there. And when they've gone back, the plates of sand have formed into the same sacred geometric shapes or rose windows that we can see in the windows, in the structures in the cathedral. So this shows that just that sound inside the cathedral as you walk in creates that sacred geometric shape, that pattern, that cymatic pattern. And it's also affecting our energy field as well. But if we think about the English language, we think about how much it's changed just over the past 50 years, over the past 10 years alone, which of course is affecting our reality, our physical reality today. All of these new slang words, we can see with the music industry, all the dumbed down TV shows, we can see that this is all altering our physical reality, and probably not in a good way. And on the other side of this, so many old words have been taken out of our dictionary. And certainly, I suspect that many of these old words were actually even used for transdimensional travel, as a way to heal our body, and maybe to even unlock portals. So we know that words carry vibration, as Dr. Masaru Emoto showed in his water experiments, and we can see also with the Hertz vibrational table as well, that different emotions are different vibrations. Solon said the people of Atlantis were the fairest and noblest race of men which have ever lived. And they said that Solon and his whole city were descended from a small seed or remnant of them which survived. So are these old world buildings and architecture Atlantean and Lemurian? Well, they certainly do remind me of Atlantean and Lemurian architecture. And Another interesting fact is that there are now over 20,000 books written about Atlantis. Why is this? Why would so many people feel called to write about a fictional world to try and remember or discover where this world was? I suspect that the old world architecture is showing us that it spanned the entire globe, the entire world. But I think more importantly, it's also asking the question, was this really 12,000 years ago? These beautiful old world architectures that we see, so many of them were destroyed. These buildings definitely could have been 1,000 years old, maybe even more, if they haven't been built in the way that we would build buildings today. But that's only taking us back a few thousand years. And the Bible as well, the stories it talks about of the Great Flood, would it really be talking about stories that go back 12,000 years? Not to mention the Sumerian tablets, would they really be talking about stories that go back 100,000 years? I get the feeling that time has been distorted or altered in some way, and we are looking at something which is far earlier than we have been led to believe. So here we've got some myths, and very interesting ones, because they are showing us things which in the past we have always put down to fairy tales, myths and legends, things that cannot be real, that cannot be true. But could they be true? And I think this is where you have to leave the analytical mind, the ego, the logic behind, and move into the more spiritual dream states to understand this. And for me, the spiritual dream states are the multidimensional states. And when we connect more with these parts of ourselves, I think we understand that one-dimensional thinking limits us, whereas multidimensional thinking expands us. And when we move into that expanded consciousness ourselves, we realize that we are unlimited and everything is possible. So let's start with the mer people, what we call mermaids. And as you can see, they are talked about in every single culture. And sometimes they're talked about as good, benevolent, and sometimes they're talked about as not so good or not liking us anyway. The Merrow that we can see talked about in Scotland are said to have webbed hands, and they wear a red cap so that they can breathe under the water, indicating that they don't have gills and are using advanced technology to breathe. Tales talk of humans marrying mermaids and mermen that date back as far as 1000 BC in Assyria. And interestingly, we have a lot of similarities with marine animals, hence the aquatic ape theory was invented to try and account for it. So are we descended from a marine animal or a mermaid ourselves? In 1721, an article reported a merman being kept for 6 months in captivity in England until he escaped. And even earlier, 1403, a female mermaid in the Netherlands was captured, and she was actually kept in captivity for 16 years until she died. But more modern day encounters tell us of the Russian Navy during the Cold War, who describe how some of their trainee soldiers were accidentally killed after trying to capture a group of 10-foot-tall amphibian-type beings. They were 165 feet down in the oldest and deepest lake in the world, the Lake Baikal in Russia. Are there beings living under the oceans? Well, I suspect that there are. But I don't know in what capacity that could be, whether we're talking about under-ocean cities or whether we're talking about other dimensions. Photographer John Hyatt in Manchester has been photographing these light beings for a few years now. He essentially photographs light, and then he zooms in on it until he starts to see arms, legs, and wings. He says that these are not photoshopped images. And interestingly, He's been releasing these images for such a long time now that he's been inundated with hundreds of photos from other people around the world who are doing the same thing. So in M theory, dimensions are said to be smaller than our physical world. So are these light beings able to cross into other dimensions in ways that we can't? We also have the Sasquatch, who's also said to be a transdimensional being. So there are many people who are now saying that they're connecting with the Sasquatch, and some of them claim to have connected and had telepathic conversations. These beings, they say that they do not speak, and they also say that they are multidimensional beings, that they cross through portals in the forests into other dimensions to stay out of sight. They do not eat, and they say that we didn't eat either. They say that we are related and they are like our big brother. But the fact that they didn't eat and they say that we didn't either reminds me of breatharians. So breatharians are people who do not eat. They live off the life force of the sun. And when you look at the old world buildings, one of the most interesting things about them is that none of them have toilets. which of course many people have put forward the theory that possibly they didn't eat either. So the Sasquatch, they have families, they have children. They are a highly loving and compassionate species, and they say that we were the same until we forgot who we are. They cannot speak, but they use telepathy. And interestingly, science has now shown that we are telepathic as well. And everything in the universe can hear our thoughts and words. So I think it's really important to be heart-led and have pure intent, because everyone is listening to what we're thinking. The Chalke is said to live underground on every continent. They are apparently from Earth and have been living alongside us for millennia. Said to live for 250 years, no one has seen one recently because they are nocturnal. So they live under the Earth. So is inner Earth multidimensional too? Well, yes, I suspect it is. I think everything is multidimensional, but we possibly don't understand exactly what that is or what that means yet. And as I was saying before, so here are some bloodlines on Earth. So for my research, when I was writing or researching for my second book, I started to track how many bloodlines there could be on Earth. So we have the dragon lines or lineage in Asia with Japan, Korea, China. We have the Numo creation. So they say that they created human beings. They created a jackal who essentially became mortal because they couldn't transfer consciousness into this being. We have the Anunnaki creation. So Adam and Lilith. Lilith was Adam's first wife. They had children. So we know that there's a bloodline there. And Eve was his second wife. And of course, Noah and his sons came after that. So we know that they had children as well. We know from the Bible that the fallen angels had children. That's another one, Nephilim. Many of the Nephilim were killed off in the Great Flood, but I think that many of them also survived because that's possibly where the giant bloodlines came from. We also have the Nagas that split into reptilians and serpents. So the serpent people are magical. The Nagas could be seen as reptilian. We have Marduk from the Sumerian gods, and he married a human female according to the Sumerian tablets. And according to Sitchin's books, we have Enki having relations with humans as well. Again, we have the giants. These are on every single continent. They literally are in the thousands. We can see that this world was inhabited by thousands and thousands of giants. Whether this was the world before us or whether we lived alongside them, we don't know. And then from the Dropa tribe, we can see that the Greys have created bloodlines. And we've also got inner Earth as well. So over the past 100,000 years or so, it is said that during the different times of cataclysms and wars, that many humans went inside the Earth and are still living there. And we've also got the mermaids as well, so the people under the sea. And interestingly, I was at a networking event once and I met a lady who had red hair. She was Rh negative. And she told me that she was born with webbed hands and feet, again, seeming to bring that mermaid link up again. And I think that there are many, many more as well. We've got the elongated skulls one that ran through the pharaohs, Ramses and Akhenaten. But energy and matter are the same. So our consciousness also affects our physical body, our DNA, just as our DNA is also affecting our consciousness. And again, we can see this with wave genetics, which we'll come to in a bit. But I think what it's showing us here is that we are many, many, many different bloodlines. And I suspect many more than this as well. According to CIA accounts, we are 10 different species, extraterrestrial species. But according to other accounts, mostly in the spiritual circles, we are 12 different species. And because so much of this universe works in 12s, I suspect that 12 is correct. So it means that we probably have 12 dimensions in our brain, not 11, but there's possibly one hidden there somewhere, or it's invisible to us. And it links with the 12 different species that we are connected with, which also links to the 12 different chakras that we are said to have in our physical body and energy body, which is also said to link us to other portals through our chakras. So it's not just our minds that are vastly advanced and don't need chips inside them. It's our bodies as well, which are made up of sacred geometric shapes themselves. We're also made up of sacred geometry. And as such, we interact and integrate with this physical world in a way that I suspect that the parasites cannot. And that is why they are using us as energy source to create a world that they want to live in. So if we just go back to that theory about the world being turned to stone, and we've got, as Levi was showing, we've got the different stone people. But here we have examples of stone giants. And this one on the far right is in Florence, Italy. It's said to have been carved in the 15th century by an artist. I'm not too sure that anyone could have carved that myself. And it really does look so lifelike. We've also got the one in the middle, which not only has been turned to stone, but also melted. And you can even see the red patches like blood coming off his body, which is very bizarre indeed. And then the one on the far left, holding up the bridge, seeming to be a helpful giant in some way. I certainly don't believe that the giants were all bad. It seemed to me that they were the people that created this wonderful old world, because so many of these buildings are so large and the doors so large that you can see that they're not created for 6-foot tall people like us. And then we have these grotesques that we can see on the bottom here, and these are found on many of the cathedrals. I think this one is in France. And you have to sort of ask, what exactly are they looking at? So they're all sort of looking into the sky, and what is it they're looking at? What is it that's just about to happen before they are turned to stone? So are these multidimensional beings that have been stapled into one dimension and turned to stone? And if we look at this, we hone in a little bit on this one. What are we looking at here? So this person here seems to be having their life source sucked out of them. Looks like some sort of dementor, and very bizarre indeed. Could someone really have carved this? Or is this when the world was turned to stone, as the Bible seems to infer? So in Genesis, we have Lot and his wife who were told to flee the city of Sodom before it was destroyed. And as they fled, unfortunately, Lot's wife turned round to look back and was turned into a pillar of salt. So is this what had happened? Is this why the gods immediately shut everything down by collapsing everything into form, stapling it all into one dimension? So the first dimension is said to be the dimension of the rocks and crystals, but we know that crystals are still living beings. But in the 3D or 4D world, they look like rocks to us. So of course, we have to ask ourselves the question, does that mean that this world is going to be wiped out, that we're going to be turned to stone or burnt in a solar flash or drowned in a flood in some way? No, I don't think so. But I think that there is a group of people that want us to believe that the end times are here, and are doing everything in their power to recreate the biblical end times. And the question, of course, we have to ask is why? Why is that? So human consciousness is creating everything. And in 1957, Dr. Professor Hans Eysenck, chairman of the psychology department at the University of London, discovered that there was a conspiracy involving 30 universities all over the world who were covering up the truth about frequencies and our human consciousness and how it affects our reality. We are a collective consciousness, and our thoughts, words, emotions, and feelings affect the quantum field, including matter. Our beliefs are literally the programs of the game. What we believe, we create. The frequencies of the morphic field can change our DNA, because DNA can be influenced by the energy waves of the morphic field. Morphic fields are patterns of informational energy that affect living systems. British biochemist Rupert Sheldrake views the morphic field as a field of evolutionary information that creates everything physical that we see today, thus making evolution a matter of energetic repetition, morphic resonance, and repeatability that works in harmony with the other fields of the universe. Simon Banger, a therapist in Poland, builds wooden pyramids for people to grow their plants inside. And he explains that this shape is funneling cosmic and solar energy in a way that enables the plants to grow better. He says this cosmic energy is an energy that is similar to what Nikola Tesla discovered and can be harnessed for our health. So it's possible that evolutionary changes in the Earth's electromagnetic field and the Earth's own morphic field might be helping to upgrade our consciousness by energetically reactivating dormant DNA. Dr. William Brown believes that the children being born now have already been genetically upgraded in utero, which is being done through telepathy or wave genetics via the morphic field. which changes our DNA. The kids are coming in with higher levels of consciousness already. As Thomas Knapp, Bridget's husband, says, any good simulation would have a default mechanism to stop it from being hacked. The gates to the higher realms have now opened, and higher frequencies are pouring in. Multiple sources are showing us that many genetic mutations are now happening in the regions where the 97% of junk DNA is located, indicating that it may be switching on dormant DNA from our past. Our DNA, once suppressed, is now able to pull from the etheric energy again and get back onto the positive path that we were on before. This is showing me that we are not going to get wiped out, as we are being genetically upgraded from within to help raise the consciousness levels of the entire collective. Human consciousness creates everything, but it works with the energies and frequencies of the ether. The higher the frequency, the more beneficial it is. All frequency carries information, which flows into our DNA, heart, and mind. If someone knows how to harness human consciousness, they can use it to create the reality that they want. And I suspect that is exactly what has been happening in our world. Someone or something has been using our consciousness to create this current reality that we see around us, and one that suits them, not us. So did we get invaded by something? Is that what happened to this beautiful old world? Well, interestingly, Sam Osmanagic and his team discovered 8 ancient rune symbols in tunnels under the Bosnian pyramid, which he sent off to 2 professors in the US to be translated. Now, as we know, runes are magic symbols and contain many levels of information. However, the translation came back as follows. The gate has been closed. We are at a standstill. We will have to defend ourselves and conquer until the cosmic gate is opened again. So do these runes tell us that this cosmic highway was broken at some point in the past? A cosmic gate was closed? If so, why and who did it? The tunnels were filled in with mud, as Göbekli Tepe was as well. So why is this? What did they know? Did they know something was coming? Or was it a mud flood of some sort? The deep state has been working on mind control techniques for decades. So we must assume that our human consciousness has been steered in a particular direction for at least the past 100 years, if not more. Has our human consciousness been subjected to a fake reality? If so, is this starting to change now as the energies continue to rise and telepathic waves upgrade our consciousness, as light codes or bundles of data pour through the portal that is the sun, which is linked to the higher energies of the cosmos, along with higher consciousness souls who have incarnated here physically, what we call starseeds, to telepathic downloads and wave genetics. It's all acting to raise the consciousness of the planet and us. Are crop circles frequencies coming in from somewhere else and helping to increase the frequencies here too? Or are they messages? Well, maybe they're both. As we can see, this crop circle is beautiful, sacred geometry, which is bound to be affecting our collective consciousness in some way, and the consciousness of the planet as well. But there have been messages as well. In 2002 in Wiltshire, a facial image that you can see on the picture shows an extraterrestrial looking face, and a data circle appeared with words. The message said, "Beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. There is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing." So it was never understood who the alien face was, whether this is the bearer of false gifts or whether this is the one sending it. But as this face looks like an image of a tall grey from the Maitreya race, it seems to be showing us the ones that we are being warned against. However, I do believe that the deep state can create these images and crop circles as well. So it may well have been them. When we consider the field of cymatics, where sound creates matter and creates geometric shapes, we can see that these crop circle patterns may well be the physical manifestation of a frequency that was broadcast to our world as a message. And so whatever happens, it's still affecting the field, because all of these geometric shapes affect the holographic field, just as the star forts would have done as well, shifting our consciousness, keeping our consciousness high, keeping us at this higher being level, as the Indian Vedas says. So what can we do? And I think this is where we need to understand how much power we have. If we were not useful, we would all be gone by now, but we're not. And we are being upgraded from within by the higher energies of the cosmos, which means that there's a lot going on. And of course, as we download these frequencies, we're also downloading information. And I think all of us know about downloads and receiving information. and channeling information. And many of us are channeling this sort of information now, that there is something shifting. There is something helping to raise the frequencies on the earth, and there's something going on behind the scenes. But if we want to look at this in a more practical state, how can we do something now to start shifting and changing this world? And I think that this, for me, is where it fits into our human consciousness. We can stop giving them our energy, and we can literally turn our backs on them. Yes, they've created these systems and laws, which are essentially the same as the Roman systems and laws, but there's something else in this, and that's called natural law, which interestingly was also called God's law. And this is our original law. So even though these people use black magic, they have no power over us because white magic is stronger. And white magic is simply love. It is the strongest energy in the universe, and it streams in from the higher realms, which is what we are feeling now. So we can collectively start to create new communities and exercise our natural rights again, which, because this is original law, it cannot be ignored. This is a legal system that we can start using again, just as we used to before. In fact, the last time natural law was used in the courts, it was 1705, which is again this same date, 1700s. Something happened in the 1700s which changed everything. And up until then, people were using this natural law. And it's essentially a natural law which is based on being a decent and moral person. So this is who our ancestors were, people that didn't need law enforcement because they were governed by being a decent and moral person. They had a very switched on internal compass, the internal GPS system, as I call it, which is our intuition. Our intuition tells us everything that we need to know, we need to do. When we switch our intuition back on, we immediately know right from wrong. We immediately know when we shouldn't be doing something. It's innately inbuilt into us. And this is how natural law or God's law works. It's using our intuition and innate understanding of what's ethical and what isn't. So we can start adopting this natural law today. The gypsies have been using it. In fact, they never stopped using it, which is why the police have never been able to touch them. They pass this information down through their generations, and they means that they can live how they want to and not participate in the now massively corrupt legal systems that we have in our world. And this is how we can turn our back on these parasitic elites and their low vibe simulation, by adopting our natural law again, using it to create systems, courts, education, energy sources, and even peacekeepers. It splits into 4 different areas, and we can use this to start creating our own communities today. So it's obvious to me that in the past, we all lived together in harmony and something changed. But we are now living in a time where it is rebalancing again. And as these higher frequencies keep streaming in from the higher realms, I suspect that the Earth already exists in multiple dimensions. And I think that we can connect to these higher dimensions, which are states of being, as soon as we are ready to. And this allows us to connect to 5D, 6D, 7D, and possibly up to 12D, or at least 11D, because our brain is set up to connect and be able to function within that 11-dimensional, 12-dimensional state of being. And I suspect that as soon as more and more of us do this and turn our back on what we are being told is true, and start connecting with our own internal wisdom to understand what world we want to make, then we can start to create a world that we want to live in. And I include everything in that. We are being pulled and pushed as far as we can possibly go into space, into different educations, into AI, into robotics. We're being pushed and pushed into these new areas, and it's being led by people who are essentially creating that reality. They are essentially defining what that reality is. And so whether they're benevolent people or not, they are still creating a world that maybe we don't want to be part of. And we need to create our own world collectively. We are the majority here, and we can do this, but we have to unite in order to do this and work together and stop fighting and squabbling amongst ourselves. For me, I don't want my destiny decided for me. I want to be able to participate and create a reality that I would like to live in. And possibly we're already doing that. As a multidimensional species, we can create multidimensional realities, or timelines, as timeline theory calls it. But I'll leave that for another day. Well, thank you very much for watching and for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I shall catch up with you again soon on my YouTube channel at Elisabeth Hancock, Elizabeth spelled with an S. All right, take care. Bye.